this section is going to be somewhat eclectic. We'll cover kind of a range, small bits of a bunch of features. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is, as you recall from the last video, we were using maintenance window to schedule the daily patching or updating of our EC2 instance just using an Ansible playbook. And it turns out there's kind of an equivalent, so there's an equivalent way of doing this with a feature called State Manager. And mostly because I just wanted to explore this, I switched from using maintenance windows to State Manager. So Manager is going to the maintenance window, deleting the maintenance window, and then going into State Manager. Now I've already got it created, but I'll just kind of walk through what the creation process is. So it's kind of, and as far as I can tell, the main difference between the two is that State Manager is explicitly meant for managing EC2 instances, whereas the maintenance window has a multiple, it can work with lambdas, it can work with a broader range of features. So it's more of a generalized tool. So I don't know, you can pick your poison if however way you want to do it, but here I just want to explore this. I'm just going to walk you through kind of the main steps. You go through to create something in State Manager. They call them associations for whatever reason. You name it, you pick your Ansible playbook just like you did before. You pick its where you want to pull it from. You have to name the bucket here. I don't have it pasted, so you basically put in the same thing you did previously. You tell it the playbook file that was like update.yaml. Then you go in and you pick your targets. We were using tags. We gave the tags. You pick a schedule, and then you're basically. I think there's at some point you specify the output somewhere here too. All right. Then you write to an S3 bucket, right? And that's about it. So not much different than setting up the maintenance schedule. Just it's done all in one shot. Okay. So that's that topic. Let me close that down. Another thing I wanted to explore was a feature that's already activated called CloudTrail, and it basically kind of gives you an audit log of all activity in your account. So, for example, if I click on event history here, you can see basically all the various API calls that essentially were made, right? And this is me, I don't know what I must have been doing something this morning. And so Fred Administrator is my user, right? And that's one tool for doing it. You could do things like, for example, with this tool, you can do a certain amount of querying. For example, you can say by username, if you want to get an audit log of Fred.administrator, if I can spell right, if I spelled this right, administrator. Right, so you can see all the various things that Fred Administrator did, right? And you can pick time ranges. So that's pretty generalized query tool, right? You can do a certain amount of filtering. Now it turns out that if you read right here, you can run advanced queries in Athena. If you follow this, it will basically create, go through a process to create an Athena query for you or a query table for you. So there's a wizard that does that for you. So I'll just show you the results. If you follow the wizard, you end up with a table here called cloud, pointing at your S3 bucket that your Athena logs are being dumped into. That your CloudTrail logs are being dumped into. And then you can write queries using SQL where you can be much more refined in your queries. And then you can run your queries, right? So, for example, and they give you can see the schema here. There's a fair amount of parameters you can be querying against. Definitely a little bit more complicated than using the simple CloudTrail query builder, right? But here you basically, I'm just running a sample query, select event name, the identity from the table, right? And then maybe I was seeing a lot of these update instance informations, which were kind of every 5 minutes. Every 5 minutes this was showing up in my logs, and I wanted to kind of filter it out so I can write a query that does a little bit more fancy query where I eliminated those, order them, descending, and then limited them by 10. So of course you can write much more complicated queries here to get at this particular data you're looking at. So just a more flexible way of querying your CloudTrail data. Okay, so CloudTrail, that's all I really wanted to cover there. The next tool I looked at was called Config, and it has, it's kind of an audit tool too. So that's why it's kind of on this audit trail theme here. Now, when you first get here, you won't see any data. You actually have to turn it on, and it does cost a little bit of money. I don't think it's that much for the amount of resources that I'm using here. But when you first get here, you basically have to turn it on. There'll be like a wizard to do this for you, and it asks you what kind of events do you want to record. I just used all the defaults, so I'm not including any IAM resources. I'm just recording events, items for this region, and it's basically dumping in using S3 bucket to store all the data, and I don't have any like logging, right? So I kind of picked all the defaults, and what this is going to do is basically keep track of all the changes of all the resources. Like, actually, go back to dashboard. It tracks certain kind of objects, right? And like AWS, they call them resources, I guess, right? And for example, I have 9 buckets, 8 subnets, blah, blah, blah. And it basically can monitor all of these. As any change goes through, it keeps track of it, right? And so you kind of get a running log of all your changes. So for example, if you want to look at your resources, you can see, for example, if I go here and type in bucket, right, and I hit lookup, right, it'll know, it query and basically queries all the buckets that you have, right? And the real power of this is you can now set up rules around these resources about looking for changes that might be non-compliant or that might be a problem. So what that has to do with is rules. Okay, so if I go to rules, normally there's no rule here. If you add a rule, there's 2 ways of doing it. You can create your own rule, which I did not do, or you can use an existing rule. And there's like 120 rules, right? So now it's a little bit daunting, to be honest. Like, which of these 120 rules should I pay attention to? Yeah, either way, that's a different problem. But in this case, I found a rule that would actually make sense to me. For example, we are using an application load balancer in our solution, right? And there's basically, here's a kind of a best practice rule where you should basically be using HTTPS, and it says check whether or not you've set HTTP to redirect to HTTPS, right? And I'm thinking, okay, well that would be an obvious thing that I don't know if I must have done it, but I don't remember, right? And so what you do is you basically pick that rule. I'm not going to do it again. So once you pick the rule, it'll run the test. You tell it how often you want to run the test. So I said run it daily, right? And if you click on the rule here, you can see basically last run, right? Yesterday it looks like, or last night it looks like. And then it says, well, basically what it does is when it ran, it tells you if there was any non-compliant resources, and then, or in this case, I had 2 compliant resources, right? So, and then you can set up rules around. If you go back into the thing, for example, if you go back in the rule, right now I don't have it do anything if it's found a problem, but if you go into the rule, you can create a remediation, right? Which is what to do when it detects a problem. And one easy button choice would be just to publish a SNS notification to send an email out essentially saying, hey, there's a problem here, and then I can pay attention to it and fix it. Okay, so that's basically all I wanted to cover about AWS Config. It's just a way to audit your resources and then set up rules and to monitor for compliance issues or non-conformity, right? And then set up things like email you when there's a problem. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to cover was I realized I never removed, when I was doing this, I realized I was still seeing the bastion around. We've already switched our way of doing patching, right? We're not using the Bastion anymore. So I'm going to take the Bastion, just to save money, out of the stack or infrastructure. And it was done through CloudFormation, not through Terraform. So I'm going to delete it here. So delete out this, and then this will play out on its own, and then we're done for this video.